I live on the east side of Albuquerque, right where the city tips toward the sandiest and the stucco turns orange like it practiced all day for sunset. My apartment is a second-floor one-bedroom over a laundromat that smells like warmed pennies and lemon. On clear mornings, I can see balloons from the Fiesta glide past like ideas nobody finished. I'm 38, divorced, and I used to ride in the back of an ambulance wearing a name patch that said R. Mendez, even though everyone just called me Ray. These days, I sit inside a ring of glowing monitors and answer an old question with a new voice. 911. What is the address of your emergency? If you've never sat at a console during a busy hour, the first surprise is how fast your mouth can move without the rest of you catching up. You learn to make your voice a metronome. Steady, counted, stubborn. Even when what you're hearing is not music. A woman timing compressions to stay human, a teenage boy saying "Mom." To a body that won't get up, the rattle someone makes when an airway is losing the argument. The second surprise is the quiet after you disconnect. The way the room rearranges itself around your breathing. Like the furniture of your head got shifted during the call. I became a dispatcher after a call I don't like to tell in full. It was a summer afternoon that felt like someone left the oven door open. Monsoon clouds stacked up but didn't commit. The tones dropped. Unresponsive person, unknown breathing, apartment 3B. My own complex. The address hit like a slap. Habit lives in muscle, not job titles. I ran down the stairs with my old jump bag from the trunk and shouldered the door. The smell at the threshold said we were late. Mr. Alvarez, who liked to shout football scores from his balcony, was on the kitchen floor. Eyes turned to a corner of the ceiling like there was something there only he could see. I put my hand where training says to put it. I said his name like a command. My body remembered the steps and then, like a betrayal, it forgot. The space behind my eyes filled with heat and buzzing. A cheap neon sign that wouldn't turn off. I knew the things to do. I did none of them for a long minute that squeezed itself into a lifetime. When I finally moved, I dragged him wrong and fumbled the phone and made a sound I later recognized as my own voice trying to be somebody else's. Fire arrived and did the math none of us can argue with. Downtime, rhythm, the clock we all secretly bow to. They took over, efficient, kind, relentless. I backed into the hall and slid down the wall until the drywall dusted my shirt. Later, in my supervisor's office, I said the only sentence that fits. I froze. Internal Affairs asked their gentle, official questions. I answered, and the answers didn't change a single second in that kitchen. I tell myself the line my supervisor told the board. He'd been down too long. Even perfect hands might not have shifted what the day had decided. But truth and blame don't weigh the same. For weeks, every time I closed my eyes I saw his mug. Broncos orange, the cartoon horse grinning like it knew a joke I didn't. I stopped sleeping, so I started running. I ran the arroyo until my knees ached. Desert smell like hot chalk. Panic riding shotgun and critiquing my form. Panic is loyal. It loves a routine. I had already left field work by then, after the kind of medication error that doesn't make the news but chews its way into your pocket. Nothing dramatic, wrong concentration, caught at the hospital. Nobody died. Still, my name went into a system that decides who gets to keep wearing patches. I stepped back before they could push. Dispatch looked like a quiet way to stay useful. There's nothing quiet about telling a mother how to breathe for her newborn in a bathroom over the sound of a shower still running. Most nights I go home to a couch that slumps in the middle and a daughter who visits on Thursdays and every other weekend. Her name is Nora. She's 10 and argues like a lawyer who knows the predicate. She still lets me braid her hair if I don't make it crunchy. Because my job is listening, she tests me with riddles at dinner. What has keys but can't open doors? A piano, I said. Also my neighbor's Kia, she said, pleased with herself. After she falls asleep on the pullout, I check the jump bag I can't bring myself to throw away, then set my headset on the counter like it's something I should bless. My job now is simpler and harder. Hold the line steady until the help I used to be pulls up to the curb. Dispatch is a factory of seconds. We take them in raw and push them out shaped, hoping the edges aren't too sharp. The console listens to 3 channels at once, fire, EMS, police, and the map redraws the city if you breathe on the mouse. We sit in a horseshoe under soft lights so the screens can boss us around. Trish, our supervisor, walks the row like a kindergarten teacher who's seen everything twice, tapping shoulders when someone's voice thins out. There's a basket of stress toys people squeeze until they split and a jar of peppermints that tastes like time passing. In my 4th month, a call arrived already loud. "He's not breathing," a man shouted over music thumping like a heart too big for its cage. I pulled the address, pinned it to the map, and said what the script says to say, "I'm here. I'm listening." A baby, 3 months. Milk on her chin, lips the color of a bruise. I talked him through turning her over, 2 fingers the width of a nickel, compressions like popping bubble wrap. The room in my ear broke into pieces. The music dropped away. Another person sobbed. A plastic bag rustled. I heard him count, and then I heard a hiccup of breath, small as an apology. "She's breathing," he cried. The way people shout in libraries when rules get replaced by relief. The lines don't sort themselves by whether you deserve them. Drunk guy dialing to argue about aliens. Woman whispering from a closet while a boyfriend kicked holes in drywall and called her by a name that boiled. Elderly man who fell, then stayed on to tell me about a dog who used to know when storms were coming. We're trained to keep the distance that keeps your voice useful. Most nights I can. Some mornings the stories seep under the door and sit with me at the sink while I brush my teeth. On Tuesdays I see a therapist across from a taco shop where the pastor is too good for my self-respect. Her rug pretends at New Mexico. Reds and turquoise and little triangles marching toward a horizon that never arrives. She's younger than me and laughs in a way that disarms, like she sets a bowl of water between us and waits. We talk about panic like it's a dog I can leash. We talk about what it meant to freeze in my own hallway while a man I liked lay dying on his kitchen floor. "You didn't choose to freeze," she says. "Your body chose for you." "Same result," I say. She doesn't argue. She knows I'm not ready to let myself off any hooks. One Friday in October, rain drilled the city sideways and storm drains coughed up the kind of trash that tells on us. Plastic forks, grocery bags, a lone sandal, calls stacked. A transformer blew and lit the sky like a magician's wrong trick. An older woman told me her husband had been cutting plywood when the saw kicked back. "It's my fault," she kept saying, as if confession could rewind. "I'm not allowed to promise anything, but I can tell someone what to do next. Fold the towel. Press hard. Don't peek. Count with me." Sometimes the only mercy we can offer is a useful verb. After my shift, I drove past my old complex and parked under the same cheating street lamp. The pool was tarped and whitening in the wind. I stood outside 3B and pressed my palm to the door like patience could pick a lock. Inside, someone else's life had already set down mugs and bought bath mats. I whispered, "I'm sorry," to a hallway that couldn't hear me, and walked the stairs because my legs needed to do something besides remember. The next morning Nora and I went to the library on Central where the murals are too bright to be tragic. She returned a stack of dog books and checked out 3 about volcanoes. On the way home she asked why people call 911 for silly things. "Because silly and scared get confused," I said. She hummed the way she does when she's filing something under useful. At a stoplight a cyclist rolled past our hood with a toddler trailer blinking like a lighthouse. My hands tightened on the wheel. An old reflex that doesn't know I'm not in the truck anymore. "You okay?" Nora asked. "Yeah," I said, and meant it for now. In December, the department piloted a program that felt like the opposite of triage. Instead of waiting for harm to find us, we'd teach neighbors how to help each other before we arrived. A consultant named it "Stop the Bleed and Breathe," which made us sound like a gym. We taped flyers in laundromats, corner stores, church vestibules. Saturday mornings we unfolded tables at the community center on Wyoming and set out tourniquets, practice dummies, cheap pocket masks, and boxes of naloxone with instructions big enough to read from across the room. I volunteered because doing is a way to outpace thinking and because the class needed a Spanish speaker who could joke. The first week, 6 people came. A cashier with blue acrylic nails that flashed when she smiled. A landscaper who stayed quiet and took notes like the test was tomorrow. A grandma who lectured me about the city's pothole schedule. A teenage boy who pretended not to care. a man from maintenance with hands like shovels, and a woman who admitted she faints at blood but hates feeling useless even more. We taught them where to press and how hard, how to wrap a band tight enough to stop the red but not the brown, how to use body weight when hands aren't enough. We practiced rescue breaths for the drowned and the overdosed, talked about calling early and staying on the line, about the math of minutes. On the third Saturday, a tall man in a Dodgers cap stepped in, didn't take a chair, and asked if he could just get the spray because his cousin was using again, and he didn't want to steal it from Walgreens. I handed him a box. 2, actually. And the cashier with the blue nails exhaled like we'd all been holding the same breath. The first time you give someone something that lets them stand between a body and the end, your hands shake a little from respect. The man touched the brim of his cap like a bow. "Gracias," he said, and left with the same careful stride he brought in. 2 days later, a girl called from Zuni. "There's water in our hallway," she said, voice thin with the effort of pretending to be brave. "And my mom says the ceiling is going to fall." I pulled the address, sent fire for the flood and EMS for the shock that might follow if gravity got ideas, and kept her on the line while she described her cat, who answers to both Luna and Hector depending on moods. Her mom grabbed the phone long enough to say the landlord wasn't picking up. I told her to flip the breaker if she knew how. She didn't. I told the girl to stand in the doorway and count the drips like lightning. By the time the crew clattered up the stairs, she'd reached 84. Snow visited the mountains and coyotes came down close enough that the news did a story about tiny dogs. We took calls about space heaters and Santa hats and plate glass doors, and one old man who dialed so I could hear his mantel clock chime because my wife liked it and now nobody does. On a Wednesday that smelled like freezer-burned wind, the line rang and all I could hear was traffic and a breath. "Stay with me," I said. "Tell me what you see." The breath rattled, pulled away, then returned. A horn, a scrape. "Lights," he whispered. "Red and blue." The call disconnected. The map showed movement toward us. I sat staring at the tiny triangle on my screen until it stopped and the logs told me another dispatcher had picked him up where I left off. Sometimes you're only the first plank on the bridge. By January, I was sleeping more and dreaming less about kitchen floors. Nora and I built a papier-mâché volcano on a baking sheet and the red food coloring stained our fingers for a week. She said the vinegar smell reminded her of Easter eggs and the time we cleaned the fridge and found the ghost of a cucumber. For an hour, the world felt ridiculous and safe. At bedtime, she asked if I missed the ambulance. "Sometimes," I said. "Sometimes I miss being inside the siren instead of listening to it." The call that tilted the year came in February. A blue sky day that pretended the wind wasn't cutting. A boy on the line, maybe 13, breathing like he'd been running. "My uncle won't wake up." Address off Gibson, an apartment behind a pawn shop I know too well. I sent the cavalry, thumbed the pre-arrival script, then threw it away because scripts don't know boys. "Tell me your name," I said. "Javi." "Okay, Javi, it's Ray. We're moving toward you. Is anyone else home?" "My grandma," he said. "She's yelling at God. You can let her. You and me will handle the breathing." He was. Kids usually are if you give them a job. He rolled his uncle and said the lips looked like coins. The chest moved a little and then not at all. "Okay," I said. "Tilt his head back. Pinch his nose. Seal your mouth over his and blow gently, like you're trying not to pop a balloon." He did. "Good." Again. Between breaths he said, "He promised me he was done." "I know," I said, "because I did. I've known so many promises with teeth marks in them." After 3 breaths there was stillness and then a cough like the city clearing its throat. "He breathed." Javi shouted, a word that sounded like somebody turning a light back on. That Saturday the Dodgers cap came back with its owner, who said his cousin had woken up swinging and then cried for 20 minutes and that both things felt like a miracle. He hugged me the way men do when they're still learning how. The grandma from Zuni arrived with cookies that disintegrated into praise. "You," she said, poking my shoulder. "You stayed on the phone." "That's the job," I said. She made a nope noise. "The job is the trucks. What you did was the staying." I wrote that on an index card and taped it to my screen. In March, a letter arrived from the board, the kind that sits on a table getting heavier. It said my case was closed. No further action. My license eligible for reinstatement. I held the paper like it had a temperature. That night, I took the elevator to the roof of the garage across from my building and watched the city breathe. Sirens stitched the edges like mending. I thought about Mr. Alvarez's kitchen, about the cartoon horse, about my hands choosing to stay stupid while a man I liked was leaving. I imagined walking back into a station, checking off an engine with a pen, running gloved fingers over hose couplings, and I felt both relief and the dog whistle ache of fear. I haven't gone back to the truck. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll keep teaching Saturdays and talking strangers through the worst minute of their lives and learn to be okay with being a voice instead of a pair of hands. Nora says I should be a both and person instead of an either or. She's right a lot lately, which is alarming. We planted basil on the windowsill in paper cups, and it's trying even when the dryers downstairs turn the apartment into a desert. On Thursdays we do spaghetti with too much garlic, and she tells me the middle school gossip like she's filing a police report. Sometimes I park by the arroyo and watch the sky do all its tricks. Balloons drift like a quiet parade. A helicopter scribbles an emergency somewhere I'll only know by the tone of a dispatcher's voice when she comes back from break. I sit with the dog of panic at my heel and keep my hand on the leash. When I close my eyes, there is still a kitchen floor. There is still Bronco's orange like a wound. There is still the feeling of a wire in my hand. But there is also a boy named Javi saying, "He breathed," and a grandmother shoving cookies at me like medals, and a little card on my screen that says the staying. If I have a prayer, if that word can live in my mouth without biting, it is small and stubborn. Let me stay. Let me keep staying. When the line rings, let my voice be a place where people can set down what they're carrying for 30 seconds so their hands can do the thing the world asks next. Let me be the staying until the trucks and the staying after. In this city that looks like a postcard when the light gets lazy, with mountains that remember how old they are, I am a man with a headset and a list on the wall. Addresses, cross streets, call types, and a promise I make out loud every shift. Hold the line.